Class 10 English, Supplementary Reader, Chapter 1, A Triumph of Surgery. Good morning, children. Today we are with Supplementary Reader, the first chapter, a story called A Triumph of Surgery. Now, let us look at the title, A Triumph. Triumph means victory, success, of surgery. Surgery has got to do with doctors, right? So, what is this triumph? Regarding what? The story is about Tricky. Tricky is a small dog. She is pampered and overfed by he is overfed and pampered by his rich mistress. He falls seriously ill and his mistress consults a veterinary surgeon. Does he perform an operation? Does the dog recover? So this is the question. And before we read, we have to find out why is Mrs. Pumphrey worried about Tricky? What does she do to help him? Is she wise in this? Who is the I in the story? So after reading the lesson, children, you are going to answer these 3 questions. Write it down in your notebook and send it the way you have done with other chapters. Okay. So keeping these questions in your mind, we are going to read the story. I was really worried about Tricky this time. The story starts with an I. We have a narrator. I was really worried about Tricky this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, and I was shocked at his appearance. So, Tricky, is perhaps in a very bad condition because the narrator is shocked at his appearance. What is his appearance? Let's find out. He had become hugely fat, like a bloated sausage with a leg at each corner. He looks like a sausage. What kind of sausage? Bloated, with a leg at each corner. His eyes, bloodshot and rheumy, stared straight ahead, and his tongue lolled from his jaws. So his eyes were bloodshot. Something is definitely wrong with this dog. Now, Mrs. Pumphrey hastened to explain. Mrs. Pumphrey is very eagerly, he is trying to explain. He was so listless, Mr. Harriet. So who is Mr. Harriet? Please find out. He was so listless, lifeless, Mr. Harriet. He seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. That means he's not having enough food. So I have been giving him some little extras between meals to build him up. Some malt, cod liver oil, and a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much, really. So the mistress thinks that the dog is not well, and it is malnutrition, lack of nutrition. So she has been giving something to eat in between meals, in addition to meals. So what is that in between snacks? Let's find. Some malt and cod liver oil, Horlicks, etc. And did you cut down on the sweet things as I told you? Did you cut down on the sweet things as I told you? That means this mistress has been already told, the lady has been already told to cut down on sweet things. I mean, she has to cut down on giving the dog sweet things. Oh, I did for a bit. I did for a bit. That means she didn't continue. But she seemed to be so big, I had to relent. She had to give up. He does have cream cakes and chocolates, so I can't bear to. He does love cream cakes and chocolates, so I can't bear to refuse him. So the dog loves creamy cakes and chocolates so much, and the lady simply cannot refuse to give him the sweet things. I looked down again at the little dog. That was a trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. What is the problem with Tricky? Greed. He'll keep on eating and eating. He had never been known to refuse food. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. Any time food is given, Tricky is going to eat. And I wondered about all the things that Mrs. Pumphrey hadn't mentioned. So, Mrs. Pumphrey has not mentioned other things. Okay? She must be surely giving other things besides. Are you giving him plenty of exercise? Well, he has his little walks with me, as you can see. But Hodgkin, the gardener, has been down with lumbago. So, there has been no ring throwing lately. So, do you think that the dog has been given exercise? No. The only exercise that he has been given is this little trot, this little walk with the lady. So, you have here the picture of the lady walking the dog, and there is the narrator, the doctor, vet, surgeon. I tried to sound severe. Now, I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down, give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. So you have to be a little hard-hearted. No, don't give him much. Give him plenty of exercise. You have to cut down on the diet. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. Oh, I will, Miss Harriet. I'm sure you're right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. She set off, head down, along the road, as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. Now, she finds it very difficult to cut down on the food, on the amount of food that has been given to the dog. But because Mr. Harriet has given him warning that the dog is really going to be very, very ill, she seemed to be a little determined to do as the doctor has advised. I watched their progress with growing concern. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat, was wearing a coat. He had a whole wardrobe of these coats for the cold weather and a raincoat for the wet days. So Tricky has got a wardrobe of clothes. Coats that is to be worn on wet days. Coats that has to be worn on cold days. He has a wardrobe of it. He's got so many. He struggled on, drooping in his harness. I thought it would be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. The expected call came within a few days. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. Tricky would eat nothing, refuse even his favorite dishes, and besides, he had bouts of vomiting. He spent all his time lying on a rug, panting. Didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to do anything. So, Tricky has got a lot of complaints now. He is not eating, he is vomiting, he is not going for walks, he is feeling so lethargic. So, the mistress has to call up the doctor. I had made my plans in advance. The only way to get Tricky out of the house for a period, I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. So, the doctor has already planned what is to be done with Tricky. And he was to be kept under observation in the animal's hospital for about a fortnight. The poor lady almost swooned. She was sure she would pine and die if he did not see her every day. So she loved the dog so much that she would faint, she would swoon, and she would die if she does not see her dog. But I took a firm line. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it best to take him without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's wailings, I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket, because that was the only way to save Tricky. Tricky could be saved only by the surgeon. Mrs. Pumphrey is not going to help him, because she has got a weakness to give him food and more food, and she is not going to take him out for exercise, and it is only going to make things worse. And so the doctor had already planned ahead that Tricky has to be taken out for at least a fortnight and has to be kept under observation in the hospital for the pets. So he was taken out. I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. The entire staff was roused, and maids rushed in and out bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys and rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl. Look at all this. The entire staff was roused. The whole house was moving. Maids were running here and there. They were bringing in and bringing out things that belonged to Tricky, because Tricky was going to be away from home for a fortnight. So what are the things they are taking out? His day bed, his night bed. Beds are also different. Day bed, night bed, then cushions, not just cushions but favorite cushions. His toys, rubber rings, bowls also different. One bowl will be given for breakfast, another bowl will be used for lunch, another bowl will be used for supper. So breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl. Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey, with a despairing cry, threw an armful of the little coats through the window. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears. So the doctor knew that if he waits for the maids of the house to bring belongings of Tricky to stay over at the hospital for a fortnight, his car is not enough. So he started driving. And the mistress, what did the mistress do? She threw an armful of the little coats through the window. So many coats. And when the narrator looked at the scene through the mirror, he noticed that everybody was crying. On the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. Pathetic. He's pathetic looking. Okay? And I patted the head, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail. Wagging his tail also he could not do very nicely. So it took him a great pain to lift up the tail and wag a little. Poor old lad, I said, you haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. Yes, he cannot do anything. Poor thing, pathetic. But the doctor knew that there is some way of curing him. So we are going to do after here. And as I told you, you look at the questions. What is to be found out? What you have to find out? Read and find out. There are how many questions given? There are, I think, 4 questions given. So you will read them. You will write them in your homework notebook and submit it to me through the WhatsApp. It's not much. Do your best. Thank you. Good day.